What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Playmakers Corner podcast. I'm your host for today, Simon Villanoz, aka Coach V, and we got more season previews here for you. We're going to talk about a lot of teams, well, I think pretty much all teams, the rest of the teams here in Colorado Springs here. We're going to talk about Fountain Fort Carson, Mesa Ridge, Discovery Canyon, Harrison, Mitchell, Sand Creek, Sierra, TCA, and Palmer Ridge here. So, like I said, a lot of teams from the Springs here, and then obviously Fountain and Monument there as well. And you know how we're going to do this, just like every season preview we've done so far, which, by the way, make sure you check out some of the ones that I've dropped, and as well as Gideon and Cody's. But we're going to start out by talking about what happened last season. You know, we'll recap all of that, regular season first, and then playoffs, and then we're going to talk about graduating seniors, player they're losing, key players to look out for that should be big contributors going into this 2023 season, and then we are going to go game by game and predict the record of each team here. In addition, we'll give each team a window of wins, so basically that means how many wins we expect them to win in this 2023 campaign here. But, you know, before we do that, we did do season previews last season, or before last season, the 2022 season. And so I do want to do a quick little breakdown of how accurate our predictions, or well, my predictions were of these same teams here. So on this episode, we got 9 teams, I believe. And so this quick little review / breakdown will be of these 9 teams, alright? Now, 4 of the 9 teams that I'm going to talk about on this episode, I predicted the regular season exactly correct. So that's pretty good right off the bat, you know, exactly correct. You don't always get that. That's really hard to do sometimes. There's always a lot of variables. So I'll take it. Then 2 other of the 9 teams here were, you know, within the window of wins, so definitely in the ballpark here. Didn't predict the record exactly correct, but their team fell within the window of wins here in the regular season, so I was relatively right, give or take a couple games. Then there was one team that was just one game out the window of wins out of the 9 here, one other team, I mean, and, you know, not in the ballpark, but still in the neighborhood. We'll still kind of take that there. And then there are 2 teams I was just straight up wrong about. And you know what? I own up to it. But hey, 6, or well, kind of 7-ish. 6 out of the 9 teams I was definitely on the money about here. 4 of them absolutely perfect with that. And then 1 I was kind of right about. And then 2 I was just wrong about. So we'll definitely take that. But with that being said, let's go ahead and hop into our first season preview here to start this episode. And that first team is Fountain Fort Carson here down south. And you know what? In the regular season, predicted them to go 7-3 here. And you know, that was exactly correct. They went exactly 7-3 as I predicted. With, you know, a couple games going a little bit differently here. But let's talk about what happened last season first. To start out, they took care of Falcon 49-21. And then the next week, they had kind of a weird week here. That was the weekend where, you know, they went up to play Highlands Ranch. They played some of the game, and then lightning storms was just going crazy. Up and down I-25, as far north as Fort Collins, and as far south as Highlands Ranch, Parker, you know, so plenty of games got canceled or rescheduled. This game was played in 2 parts, so not only did they go up for the first part of this game, but they had to come back down to Fountain Fort Carson, and then the next day, they went back up to Highlands Ranch and resumed that game. That was the game they lost, 22-21. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I definitely did not have them losing to Highlands Ranch here. But, you know, hey, it happens, right? It was kind of a weird, fluky thing. I think having to play a game, you know, 2 days, like, split like that, and it's away both times. That's definitely not easy. I mean, that's a lot, right? That's definitely a lot to be doing there. So there you go there. That one I was wrong about. But, the next week they would play Pueblo West. This was a game that I thought they would lose, but instead they blew them out 40-0 here. So that was huge. That was definitely an off game for West, but Fountain Fort Carson did not care, and they took care of business. Following that, they played Pomona and Doherty. Both were blowout wins, as I predicted. 45-0 versus Pomona. 51-0, geez, against Doherty. Then they played Pine Creek here. I want to say this, or no, it wasn't this game. It would be a later game, but this game was pretty close here. Only lost 14-0 to them. So there you go there. And then they would play Legend here. This was a game that I thought they would win. Pine Creek game, by the way, I believe I predicted them losing. But anyways, they played Legend. This one was away. They lost to them 43-24. I didn't think Legend would be that good, but they were. And Fountain Fort Carson, they lost. So there you go. So that's another one I got wrong. But then they beat Douglas County, as I expected, 61-29. Chaparral, 46-9. They would get that win back. And would beat Regis Jesuit 21-14 in a close one here. So that would kind of bring them back to that 7-3 record. So just a couple games, flipped here, but still they were at 7-3, and that was good enough for them to make the playoffs. In the first round in the playoffs, they would go ahead and hammer Eagle Crest at home 42-14 before having to play away against Cherry Creek, the defending champs, where they would fall 42-6. So kind of a tough go there for Fountain Fort Carson, but nonetheless a very successful season for them. Now, Fountain Fort Carson, they are graduating some very key players, some mainstays of the squad who have been around for an extremely long time. It felt like Tavion Tooley is one of those guys. I think he was a 3-year starter. He passed for 2,077 yards, 22 touchdowns, only 11 interceptions, while also running for 609 yards and 8 touchdowns in his senior year. Now he will be going to the University of Northern Colorado. I believe he'll be playing linebacker over there. And, he's a great athlete that will be missed. This was a guy that was a great athlete, could run the ball, could pass the ball. It took some time getting going, I would say, but I think his senior year definitely showed where his potential was at. And, all around, he was always just a great athlete. So he always provided, that second rushing threat, which he was. He was the second leading rusher on this team. So he will definitely be missed, him and his leadership, which I think is very important. They also graduate Darian Martin here. He was the wideout one for Fountain Fort Carson. Had 40 receptions, 678 yards, 7 touchdowns here. He also broke a couple records for Fountain Fort Carson in the regular season. I believe against Legend, he broke some records, but unfortunately that was a loss. So there you go there, but he will definitely be missed. In addition, they lose their second leading receiver in Josiah Steven Silva. He was actually our second best tight end in the class of 2023, making our top 5 seniors list. He was also an all Playmaker guy. He had 504 yards on only 25 catches, also snagged 5 touchdowns there. So those two will definitely be tough, players to miss out on, especially Tavion Tooley as well, to add on to those two. So there's that passing game there for Fountain Fort Carson. Now on defense, they lose a big one here in Ty Fave here. He was our number 1 rated middle linebacker in the class of 2023, and he led this team with 105 tackles, 2 sacks, and 3 interceptions. Also was a running back option for them, so he ran the ball a bit as well. He's been the heart and soul of this team for a really long time. Now he's going to go do his thing over at Washington State, so obviously rooting for bro here, but he's not going to be easily replaced. So there you go there. On top of that, they lose actually their top 3 leading tacklers, one being Ty, the other one being Lane Grappelberg here, who had 86 tackles, the other one being another linebacker, and Michael Madrid here, who had 82 tackles. So losing those guys. Oh, and they're also losing a player who I think I should mention here, Darren Powell Jr., who was a senior. He was tied in the leader for sacks, and the lead for sacks with 4. So that's another one they will lose. Also, Ty, by the way, was actually the lead interception leader with 3 on this squad. So altogether, losing 5 of their top 13 tacklers. It also looks like they're losing 2 or 3 starting offensive linemen as well here, so that's definitely going to be tough. Fountain Fort Carson going through some major changes. I mean, this class of 23 group was extremely special, and they helped set the tone for this program for years to come here, so that's definitely going to be one that they will be missing on here. Definitely going to be tough, for them. But with that being said, they still are a talented squad. They returned a lot of good players, starting with their offensive line, led by 3-star Lincoln Paoli, guard, I want to say Preston Johnson, and then I believe he will be playing center, and Matthew Jennings here. Jennings was a former guard for Pine Creek, actually, but transferred to Fountain Fort Carson last year. Did his time there, sitting out the season, but now he will be returning for his senior year. And, Matt Jennings, he was a guy that I got to see, ball out for Pine Creek a couple of years ago as a starter there. One of my key memories with him was, leading that charge against Loveland in the playoffs where, they needed to score on the goal, they needed to score, I want to say, on the goal line. I wasn't wrong there, and they did. And so that was definitely huge in winning that Loveland game for the first time in a while that Loveland has been beat by a spring squad. So Matt Jennings, he's a tough lineman. Adding him on to this interior will be huge here. Lincoln, I believe, will still play left tackle. Preston Johnston will be at guard here. And so you have that big 3 here. All watch list guys, by the way. I think all these guys could play on the next level. That brings up one of the toughest offensive line in the entire state here. So they should be good going into the season. I know they are losing some starting linemen, but they return Lincoln and Preston, who played last year, and they also return Matt Jennings here, who, like I said, transferred, did sit out the year, but should be good to go here. And I believe they return one other lineman. I could be wrong, or maybe someone who is in the rotation. But I think this offensive line will be fine. That's the point I'm trying to make here. Continuing to speak on offense here, let's talk about the running backs, because these 2 running backs, that they have coming back really turned up last season. Both of them will be seniors, and I think one of them, Matthias Price, will be the lead guy. He ran for 947 yards and 8 touchdowns on a whopping 7.5 yards per carry. He is 6'2", 220 pounds. He will only get stronger and faster. He kind of just reminds you of one of those old school type of running backs, like the Boobie Miles type, who's just big, strong, and fast. He will run over dudes, but once he gets into that top gear, he's gone. And so Matthias Price, I think, is definitely one of the best running backs in the entire state. He's going to be tough to watch, running also behind an extremely tough offensive line that's going to clear the way. He is going to be part of a bruising Fountain Fort Carson offense there. But to go along with him is Khalid Smith here. Either Khalid or Khalid, excuse me if I'm saying that wrong, but he had 311 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. Despite the numbers, this kid could play and be an RB1 on a lot of other teams, I'm not going to lie. He is pretty big himself at around 5'11", 200 pounds, but he's really shifty. He's kind of the more change of pace type of back here. This duo is going to be lethal behind an extremely tough offensive line, and so there's your engine right there. Now, looking at the quarterback spot, they are going to have to replace Tavion Tooley, and I think they have 2 options here. And I don't know who's going to start yet. That hasn't obviously been announced at the time I'm recording this. It is July 18th, so we'll just have to see what happens. One is going to be a transfer from Kentucky, actually, in Darren Fredrickson. The transfer quarterback is a nice dual threat, very similar to Tavion Tooley, I think. It does a lot of the same things he does. Now, does he have the chemistry and leadership that Tavion had with this team? Chemistry, definitely not. Leadership, I don't know. He has been gone for a couple of years. I believe he did play in their youth program years ago, and so for him to be back, that'll definitely be interesting there, but he's definitely more of the dual threat that they are used to. Now, There is a rising sophomore here, though, in Colton Kamba, who, I've been able to watch multiple times through the off season, and I've also been able to follow pretty much since his 8th grade year. I want to say he was a freshman last year, and honestly, the more I watch him, the more I'm like, this kid could start, and he could play, and he could be really good. The way he throws the football with accuracy and timing and just knows the system, that's definitely big time here. And so I could definitely see him being the starter moving forward here. And maybe Fredrickson is more of a situational guy that gets thrown in there. But, wouldn't be surprised if either plays. I think it will be interesting to see what happens, with this situation here. I think Kamba could probably use one more year. Fredrickson, he's going to be a senior, so he's going to be gone after this year. So it's going to just be on Fountain Fort Carson's coaching staff to decide what they want to do. But don't be surprised if Kamba gets in there every now and then. He is that talented. All right, so offense will be interesting here. They have 2 solid options at quarterback that, a lot of other teams in Colorado don't have. It's hard to have one good quarterback, nonetheless 2, right? So we'll just have to see what they go with there. But regardless, they'll have a good offensive line, a senior-heavy offensive line, by the way, and some really good backs to be working with. So there you go. Now on defense, they got a plethora of guys here. Let's start up front here. I want to start with Anthony Johnson Griffin. He was 4th on the team in tackles with 58, and then actually co-led with 4 sacks here. He's an ultra-athletic outside linebacker, edge rusher, who honestly may be good enough to play middle linebacker as well. Regardless, his return will be huge for this defense here. I mean, he's definitely a threat off the edge, but like I said, definitely athletic enough to kind of just plug him in at middle linebacker, since they are losing a couple guys there between Madrid and 5A. So we'll just have to see what happens. Regardless, he's a talented guy that'll be there. Now, the next 2 players I want to talk about, I believe, are brothers in the Coleman twins. Trevor Coleman is the 6'2", 230-pound defensive end edge rusher. He was 6th in tackles last year with 47, while being tied for sacks with 4. He looks to be a little bit more of a 3-4 defensive end and interior lineman at times, but he definitely can bounce outside and play edge rusher too. Regardless, he's a big return for this Fountain Fort Carson defense. He's very fast, I would say, along with good power at his position, and that'll cause issues for some teams for sure though. So he's definitely going to be a problem. His brother Terrence Coleman, he had 37 tackles, maybe not as productive, but I definitely could see him moving forward. He is very talented as well off the edge. And so between this linebacking core, I mean, they got edge rushers here. It will be interesting to see how they are used moving forward. Regardless, I think they're going to have some really good pieces to work with on defense. Since they are only losing 5 of their top 13 tacklers, they're not losing that many. I think the front 7 will definitely be one of the strengths. But they are adding a player that will really make this season interesting for Fountain Fort Carson, and that is Miles McClarty here. He had cancer, he battled it, now he's back, and he has reclassed to the class of 2024 after having to take a little bit of a break here battling cancer. But like I said, he's back. He's went to a couple camps, and the last time he played was back in 2021, where he was part of one of the most elite secondaries the state has ever seen, thrown in with 3, and I'm saying 3 top 5 senior corners, and he was a part of that secondary over at safety. Now, 1 year removed here, he's looking to play 1 more year of football here. The 6'2", 165-pound, currently listed 165-pound corner / safety, DB, whatever, is going to be back here. And I can't speak enough about, first off, how great it is. I'm so happy for him. He's such a great kid. He works extremely hard. He's definitely going to be one of the best feel-good stories going into the season. But, just having a guy like Miles McClarty coming back, a guy that played with dudes like CJ, Jaden Allen, Ty, all these guys, man, that's huge, right? I mean, you really can't forget he was a part of that great class of 2023 that helped define this Fountain Fort Carson program, at least, to the present, right? And so I think he still embodies that. He embodies Fountain Fort Carson football. He's a tough dude, and he's definitely somebody that's going to lead a defense and hold it down back there. Just talking about football, right? All stories aside, he could play. And he's a guy that could definitely be a top 5 senior list guy, a potential DPOY guy. He is due for a big-time season for Fountain Fort Carson. And so for them to have all these pass rushers, and be missing some guys, and for them to bring back a guy like Miles to hold it down back there, that is going to be big time and an extremely big boost for Fountain Fort Carson here as they look to make a run here. So there you go there. A lot of talent coming back for Fountain Fort Carson as they gear up for another big season here, as it should be, honestly. And so with that being said, let's talk about the schedule. To start out, they play Falcon. That's definitely a dub there. They should hammer the football on the ground, controlling the pace of the game, and this defense should be good and be able to shut down this Falcon offense, plain and simple. So there you go there. Following that, they play Highlands Ranch, unless it's another big fluke, and it would have to be a pretty big fluke since they're losing a lot. They're not going to lose that game. So there you go, 2-0 to start. Following that, they play Pueblo West away here. I think that's another dub. Could be closer if Pueblo West chooses to let it rip and throw the ball, but, past experiences have said otherwise, so there you go, though. Even then, Fountain Fort Carson, I expect them to play some tough football here and just grind the ball on the ground here and play good defense. So there you go. These first 3 games, I think, will actually be really important for whoever's at quarterback. Well, you know what? Let's say first 5 games, because they also play Pomona and Doherty. I think those are both wins as well. I'm not really even doubting those as wins, as Doherty does lose a lot. They don't have a quarterback. Pomona, they had some guys start last year, but I know Lovett over there, who was a newcomer of the year candidate, is now at Cherry Creek. So now they're without him as well. So they, those programs face uphill battles, but I think Fountain Fort Carson pretty, handedly goes 5-0 here, maybe 4-1 to start if they lose to West or some other team, but should go 5-0 here, and I think their quarterback should be pretty confident at this point because they do play in a tough league, and it starts with Pine Creek away, which isn't that far. I mean, it's only a D20 stadium, but that's Thursday, September 28th, 6 p.m. I am looking to be at that game, as well. I don't live far from D20, ASD20 at all, so I'll be at that stadium for sure. So that should be a fun one here. I'm going to give it to Pine Creek for now, though. Definitely winnable. It just kind of depends on how comfortable the quarterback at this point is, because, these 2 programs I think will match up pretty solidly, but I think the better quarterback is going to give them the edge. Cam Cooper, I mean, he already started last year, right? Going into this season, learned a lot. He should be pretty tough to beat. And so, your quarterback has to be at least decent enough to stack up against Cam Cooper. And then you got the rest of the squad they got to worry about. They got 2 really good running backs and dudes of their own over there. And Mason Miller and Jonathan Core, who are basically, the Matthias Price and Khalid Smith of Pine Creek. So, plus they have one of the best defenses, a great secondary, ton of linebackers, It's going to be an uphill battle. Plus, it's away as well. I don't know if that matters too much, but, maybe it does. So, I'm going to give Pine Creek the slight edge here. But if they do win it, that means their offense played smart. You can't have too many turnovers against a team like Pine Creek, because I think every one of those will definitely matter. So I'm going to call that a loss. Then they play Legend. This one's at home this time. I think it's a loss, same as the Pine Creek game, but I also think they're going to have an inexperienced quarterback, so that maybe helps them out a little bit. This game feels a little bit more winnable than Pine Creek, though. Still tough, regardless, as Legend, I think, is a top 5 team in 5A here. But, we'll just have to see what happens there. They could win it. They could definitely win it, but their defense has to be on their toes. They play a real tough Legend squad with 3 of the best backs in the state. So there you go. And plus some really underrated wide receivers. Following that, though, they play Douglas County, Chaparral. I think those are all dubs. And then at the end of the season, they play Regis Jesuit. I think this is another winnable game, but with the whole season to gel before this game, for Regis that is, I think this is definitely the toughest version of the 2023 Regis Jesuit team that they'll be playing here. Could go either way. I kind of feel the same about this game as I do the Legend game. Definitely better than playing Pine Creek. But we'll just have to see. So there you go. But still, though, for now, I have Fountain Fort Carson going 7-3 with a window of wins between 7 and 10 here. Yes, I do think they can go undefeated if everything goes their way, but they would have to beat Pine Creek on the road and then Legend and Regis at home for that to happen, along with the rest of the teams as well. And that's not going to be easy. Now, if they do, then I think they have shown that they are a team that could be a contender. And, I think if they even beat 1 or maybe even 2 of those 3 teams, I think they get a bye in the playoffs too, which would be huge for them as well, as they get some extra prep time there. So we'll have to see. Regardless, I still think Fountain Fort Carson goes to the playoffs, and they'll be a higher seed team, at least, top 12, top 13, whatever it is. And we'll just have to see what happens here. I mean, they're going to run behind a dominant line. They have 2 studs at running back. They have talent at quarterback, which is going to be a big question, just seeing how well whoever steps in is going to play. So we'll just have to see what happens there. And then on defense here, they're losing Ty, right? So that's big. How is this team going to look without Ty Fave for the first time in like 4 or 5 years, right? So we'll just have to see. But still, they should be due for a really good season here in 5A. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about Mesa Ridge here next. So I was wrong about them. I had them going 5-4 originally with a window of wins between 4 and 6, but they went 7-3 here in the regular season. They're just 1 game ahead of my window of wins and 2 games ahead of my predicted record. So, not in the ballpark, but still in the neighborhood. Wasn't too far off here. Let's talk about where I was wrong here, though. So to start, they did beat Kennedy as expected, 55-13. I never really expected that one to be a super close game. They would also drop games against Palmer Ridge, 28-7, Dakota Ridge, 56-30 as expected. Would beat Doherty in kind of a closer game. It looks like 42-30, but that was a really good Doherty team, to give them credit there. Following that, they would also beat Widefield 48-3. And then this is kind of where things change a little bit. So I got the first couple games right. But then they played Pueblo West here. I thought Pueblo West was going to throw the ball. And even then, I don't know. I still thought they were going to lose this one regardless. But they would end up beating them 21-14 in a close one. So that's kind of where things changed a little bit here. They would go ahead and take care of Coronado, who I thought they might lose to. Or actually, I don't know if they were scheduled. I think they should have been. Yeah, no, I definitely had them losing to Coronado, I think. But they beat them 49-3. They beat Rampart, which I predicted 56-14. They played Montrose on the Thursday. I actually went to this game. This was a really good game. A little bit of a shootout here, but unfortunately, they didn't have their kicker, which ended up mattering a lot more than, you would think, but it ended up mattering a lot more, as in the first half, Montrose had some really short fields to work with, and on top of that, Mesa Ridge definitely left a couple points on the board as a result. They would get their kicker back in the second half, though, but by then, they were losing. So they lost that one, a close one, 46-31, but still a lot to feel good about against a team there like Montrose. Then they'd play Falcon and beat them 49-15, and so that would conclude their regular season there. So, got a couple games wrong. but did get a couple right there. Now, in the playoffs, they would go ahead and play Monarch round one, which actually looked like a really good one, where they only lost they beat them 49-21. Monarch lost this one here. And, Monarch's not a bad squad at all, kind of younger like them. So they would go ahead and move on to the next round here, where they would play Heritage away here and lose a close game, 21-10 here. At this point, I want to say those 10 points that they scored was the lowest amount they scored since the Palmer Ridge game, which was their second game of the season, where they only scored 7. And it's their second lowest score all season in general. So there you go there. This was a very explosive offense, by the way. So tough there, but Heritage, they did have a good defense. So gotta give them credit. Now, let's talk about some graduating seniors, as they are losing just a couple guys here. Let's start with Carver Cheeks, the 6'3 athlete. He's now going to UNC here, as well as his brother, by the way. Both very talented dudes. Carver made our all-playmaker list, I'm pretty sure, here. And he caught for 988 yards, 14 touchdowns on 48 receptions, on his way to making our all-PMC list, having a career year. And he was a true wideout one for them and will be missed. Also on defense, he added on 2 picks. He's a great 6'3 athlete. That's definitely something that's going to be tough for them to replace moving forward. They also graduate senior linebacker Antonio Thomas. He had 87 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, along with leading the team in 3 sacks and adding on an additional 2 interceptions. He was one of the leaders of the defense. Like I said, another guy who will be missed. And then one more player I do want to talk about here is Dante Duncan. He's another linebacker who had 70 tackles and 3 tackles for loss there. Altogether, they're only losing 5 of their top 13 tacklers, but that does include 3 of their top 4 leading tacklers. That's Thomas and Duncan, like I mentioned, and then another player in Sherban who had 50 tackles there. So not losing your entire, defense, and, you're losing your top receiver. That's not the worst thing that could happen, right? So that's definitely not the worst thing that could happen. For the most part, Mesa Ridge actually returns the majority of their team, and that starts with Isaiah Jones here. As expected, he became the workhorse for this team and had a breakout year, running for 1,517 yards and 16 touchdowns. Also added 69 tackles, and 11 tackles for loss. He's a key leader returning for this team. He's a special athlete, and I think he's due for another big year in his final season with Mesa Ridge there. He's been such a tough player for them, and he's been a mainstay for the squad. By the way, he was 3rd on the team in tackles too. So there you go there. Definitely excited for Isaiah Jones here. I think he's a next level player regardless of how you cut it. They also bring back Tanner Whittick. He was the clear number 2 receiver option to Cheeks. He caught for 628 yards and 8 touchdowns on 32 receptions. Should be a key part of this passing game moving forward as the lead guy. I do want to mention there also is another receiver who I think could take a step forward in Avant right here. Only had 16 receptions, but that went for 186 yards and a touchdown there in those 16 receptions. That's 11 yards a catch here. Look for him to take another step forward. I think he's a very solid wide receiver as well. Now, the guy throwing to them is Bryce Reel. He was a sophomore last year, and he really impressed me. He threw for 2,131 yards, 23 touchdowns to only 11 picks. In his first year. He also rushed for 214 yards and 7 touchdowns. Against a tough Montrose squad, he had one of his most electrifying performances where he really impressed me, throwing for 289 yards, 3 touchdowns while rushing for 55 yards and a touchdown, having his best game all season. And that's against a defense that's very good in Montrose. I fully expect him to take a step forward and be one of the best quarterbacks in the state next year. Also, by the way, I'm pretty sure he won state in basketball as well. So, it'll be interesting to see if he could maybe win one in football too and be one of the first ones Maybe not the first one, but, be in that group of athletes in Colorado high school football history who has done that. So there you go there. I think he'll be a huge part of this offense here. And then last but not least, we have Trayvon Salas here. As a freshman, he was a Newcomer of the Year candidate, and I want to say he actually won Newcomer of the Year here. He was the running back, too, for Mesa Ridge, but he ran for 846 yards and 9 touchdowns here. That's 5.6 yards a carry in the 150 carries they gave him. He flashed big-time playability. He's a home run hitter. Paired with a tough back in Jones, he forms one of the best running back duos in the entire state. And big things are expected of him going into year 2, as he will only be a sophomore here. And then, by the way, Bryce will be only a junior going into going into this 2023 season. So a lot of weapons for Mesa Ridge. They should still be tough. Obviously, losing a guy like Carver, you're not always going to completely, be able to replace that, but you got to expect Jones, Salas, and Real to take a step forward here, along with Tanner Whittick as well. But if Real takes a step forward, then I think Whittick will too. So there you go there. This will be a tough Mesa Ridge squad. Now, with that being said, let's talk about this upcoming season here. To start, it looks like they play Palmer Ridge on August 31st. This is a game that I am looking to go to here. It will be a home game here. And this is going to be a tough game, but honestly, for the first time in a really long time, I think this is their best chance at beating Palmer Ridge. They lose a tough secondary, Palmer Ridge does, along with some great running backs. So it will be kind of a close one. They still have a quarterback over there. Also, by the way, they lost their head coach too, but, just hired their DC. So there's some continuity there. But they, like I said, they still bring back their quarterback. They still bring back a ton of great linebackers over there. This is a team that could definitely still stop the run. Now, will they be as physically imposing on offense? We will definitely have to see about that here. But I just think at home, first game of the season, this is a winnable game for Mesa Ridge, so I'm going to give it to them. But following that, they play Dakota Ridge here. It will be at home, actually, September 9th. And I think that'll be a loss here. It's going to be a close game, potentially one they could definitely win. But Dakota Ridge does return a really good defense, and I feel like that kind of gives them the edge here. Plus, they return Blake Palladino at quarterback too. So, we'll just have to see what happens. It could go either way, but I'm going to give it to Dakota Ridge for now. Then they play Doherty, Widefield. Both of those should definitely be wins for Mesa Ridge here. Doherty, they lose their quarterback and some other guys. Widefield. They beat them last year, and I think relatively the same team is coming back. They should beat them this year. Then they play Pueblo West. Hey, until Pueblo West cuts it loose in the passing game over there, I think Mesa Ridge will unleash their offense on them and will make it tough for Pueblo West to stop here. We'll see. We'll definitely see. It's going to be close, but I'm going to give it to Mesa, though, here. Following that, they play Coronado, Rampart. Those should both be dubs. Then they make the road trip to Montrose, which is tough. I'm not going to lie. That's really tough. First off, they're really good at home. And part of it is because you have to make a really long trip there as well. This is going to be a difficult team to prepare for, too, in general. And so they're going to have to play their best to beat him. That means offense can't have turnovers. You got to score at least 3 or 4 times. Really make Montrose try to throw the ball. And then defensively, you got to key in on this run, which is pretty tough to stop, as they know from last year. So there you go. And then they play Falcon at the end of the season. That should definitely be a dub there. Now, as of right now, they only really have 9 games scheduled. They have Rampart scheduled twice here. I assume that's a placeholder, so they're going to probably add another team to this mix here. So we'll just have to see what happens. I trust that they're going to win that game, though. So I have them technically going 7-2, but probably for sure 8-2 here when they replace that other game, non-league game. And I will give them a window of wins anywhere between 6 and 9 here. The Dakota Ridge and Montrose games are 2 games that could go differently, as in I think they could win those. But they could also lose the Palmer Ridge game as well, and potentially the Pueblo West game. So that's kind of your range there. I'm looking at those 4 games, but I definitely feel like, they could come out and beat those squads and at least be at 2-2 with those 4 teams: Dakota Ridge, Montrose, Palmer Ridge, and Pueblo West. But regardless, it should be a pretty good year for Mesa Ridge. Losing Cheeks will be tough, right? But they got a formidable running back duo who I think can run for over 2,000 yards again. Also adding a quarterback who passed for at least 2,131 yards. I think he could even pass for more than that, maybe 2,500 to 3,000. We'll just have to see, honestly. But this offense really should be cooking this season, assuming everyone took a step forward. So look out for Mesa Ridge making some noise going into this next season. Moving on here, though, let's go ahead and talk about Discovery Canyon here. I predicted them to go 7-2. They only had 9 games scheduled, though, so I couldn't have possibly predicted more than that. But they went 7-3, so I'm going to count that as predicting the record exactly right here, because for the most part I did, right? And so let's go ahead and talk about the schedule here. To start, they played Lewis Palmer. Like I said in my predictions last season, I said that should definitely be a dub there. Same with the Pueblo South game. I thought the Pueblo South game might be a little bit closer, and it was. 21-7, right? But they still won it. Following that, they played Lutheran. I didn't think they could beat Lutheran at all, so got that one right. Same with Evergreen, who they played right after that. 2 away games in a row, by the way, which is tough. I don't think they were ever going to beat them, so that's definitely tough. But then they come back home and play Pueblo Centennial, and they beat them 24-21. They would go ahead and play Mitchell, which I predicted as a dub, 58-6. They would play Pueblo County, which I predicted as a win, which was a close one, 16-12 there. I did predict them to beat Canyon City, but instead it ended up being an overtime game where they lost 19-16. It is what it is, right? But they would bounce back and get a key win here against Pueblo East, 16-13 here, which would really kind of catapult them into the playoff conversation, as that was extremely key. And then they would go ahead and beat Sand Creek at the end of the season, which wasn't on their schedule before. At the time, I probably would have predicted that as a win. So there you go there. Most of their schedule I predicted relatively correct, though. So there you go. Now they would go to the playoffs, but they would play Roosevelt, who's the 1 seed, and lose 41-0. So kind of tough there. But let's talk about some seniors. They're graduating, as they are graduating a pretty solid amount here. Now I am gonna say this. It looks like I don't know if this is completely right, but it looks like some of their stats is a little incomplete here with some players, so just keep that in mind here. But they graduate Sam Janes, and I would say also Trevin Alessio. I thought Alessio was going to be the starting quarterback, ended up being Janes. Regardless, they lose both. Janes, he had 485 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. Also threw for 248 yards, a touchdown to 2 interceptions, which I don't know how accurate that is, but that's tough. He was also a second leading tackler with 59 and a leader in INTs, interceptions, that is, with 3. They also lose Ethan Emmons and Luke Rusko here, 2 of their running backs. So that's definitely going to be tough. Rusko and Emmons, they combined for 782 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. So there you go there. That was a lot of actually their production this season, and Emmons was their lead receiver with 96 yards and a touchdown too. So there you go there. Then on defense, it looks like Ryan Orlowski was the lead tackler with 80. on the team, and so he will be graduating as well. Altogether, they lose 8 of their top 13 tacklers. That does include 3 of their top 5 leading tacklers. Their top 3 leading tacklers actually are all leaving, so they're losing kind of a lot of players here. It's going to be a pretty fresh slate here, as you have almost a brand new squad, I would say, going into this one. I mean, on offense, there's only 1 player or 2 players, I guess, who got over 100 yards, and that's Yusuf and O'Connell with 152 rushing yards and 138. So there's that. But let's talk about key players, though, before we hop into more of that. Starting with Jude Suhada, I want to say. Excuse me if I'm saying that wrong. But he is one of the few players returning for this offensive line, both on offense and defense. He is their biggest player, and going into his junior year should be a big part of the squad, kind of hoping to contribute some continuity. They also bring back Luke O'Connell, who I mentioned earlier. He got some snaps and should probably be the next quarterback for them. Only threw for 171 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks, but did rush for 138 yards and 3 touchdowns. Considering they lose the majority of their offense and defense, it's going to be important to bring him back, as he will be an incoming senior, which is tough. So there you go there. Those are the 2 main players, honestly, that I'm going to talk about here, as the rest are pretty unproven here. So that makes me really nervous about Discovery Canyon. I mean, they did go 7-3 in the regular season, but they lose the squad that kind of got them there. So let's talk about this season here. First things first, they play Lewis Palmer. This was a team that, they were barely able to beat last year. Lewis Palmer returns a lot more. They're going to run the ball. They're going to be tough to beat. I think that's a loss. Then they play Pueblo South here. South has more established players, I think. They are losing some guys, but they have a number of established players. I still think, I think Pueblo South is going to be able to win this one for sure, is what I'm trying to say here. So there you go. Then they play Lutheran. They're not winning that game. They play Evergreen. They lose a lot of players as well here. And it could potentially be a win, but I kind of doubt it here. I think Evergreen returns some good size up front, which I think will be a struggle for Discovery Canyon, handling, bigger bodies up front. So there you go there. Following that, they play Pueblo Centennial. I would say Centennial returns more than Discovery Canyon here, just barely. I think this is definitely going to be a close one, but it is away, and I think this is going to be a loss for Discovery Canyon, but could definitely go both ways. Following that, they play Mitchell. That should be a win. They play Pueblo County. I think that's a loss. They return some really good guys there. Running back, good corner / receiver, and Gonzalez, plus their quarterback. I think that is a loss. Canyon City, though, I think could be winnable, but I think it's going to be a loss, as they do return Jake Adamich, who's a really good running back, and I think they'll really rely on him. And I do have some questions about this Lutheran defense, so there is that as well. So that's another loss. Then they play Pueblo East. Pueblo East, even without their quarterback, I think is still pretty talented, so that's a loss. And then following that, they play Sand Creek here, and I think that's a loss. Sand Creek is looking to turn things around. They got some guys there in Elijah Brothers and Haziah Rapp. I think that's going to be a lot for Discovery Canyon to handle here. So we'll just have to see. Altogether, I have them going 1-9 with the window of wins anywhere between 0 and 3. It's just hard to see them turning up with so many losses here. You need some established players to win, right? And maybe they have players that emerge and come through during the season, which, I definitely welcome it. I would love to be proven wrong, but I got to see that production first here. And so we'll just have to see what happens moving forward here. Also would love for them to take their stats a little bit better. But it will definitely be a growing year here for Discovery Canyon. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about Harrison High School here. Last year, there were only 6 games scheduled when I was going to do their season preview. So I gave them a tentative window of wins anywhere between 3 and 5 there. Well, regardless, they still went 8-2 in the regular season. So this was one of the teams that I was wrong about here, as they, like I said, they did go 8-2. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about this here. So to start, they would lose to Widefield. I mean, That was a game that I actually thought they would be able to win, but they lost that one. Then against TCA, they lost to them. I predicted that one correctly. County wasn't scheduled yet, but they would beat them pretty closely here, 14-7. Would go ahead and beat Mitchell 56-0, like I predicted. Would beat Canyon City 26-6. That was another one I got wrong. They would go ahead and beat Lewis Palmer 19-13. That one wasn't scheduled, along with Pueblo Centennial 54-12 here. I did predict them to lose to Pueblo South, but they did beat them closely here 14-0. So it was at least a closer game here. And then the last couple games, well, the last two games, the Sierra game, I predicted that as a win, which they won 49-6 at the end. But the Pueblo Central game was probably the most key game for them here to make the playoffs, and they beat them 28-16 to punch their ticket in. Now, unfortunately, they would face Durango in the first round, and so that was a 42-13 loss there. But regardless, gotta feel good about the season. I mean, they went 7-2 here, 8-2 here, I'm pretty sure, and so it's pretty good. I mean, they had some really tough wins at the end here. Lewis Palmer ended up being huge. Central ended up, like I said, being big. I think that was the game that really sent them to the playoffs there and helped them out a whole ton. So there you go there. That was last season for Harrison. Now let's talk about some players they are losing, as they are losing some pretty significant guys here. Starting with Diego Watt. He was their starting quarterback the last 2 years. He contributed 7 touchdowns, but did have 8 picks and a fumble. So maybe not the most efficient there. Also had 5 rushing touchdowns on 100 yards rushing. So there you go. And on defense contributed 23 tackles. So regardless, I mean, of success, you still want continuity at quarterback. You're definitely losing that there. And then going down to the line here, they're losing Antonio Cami Valdez. He played on both lines, offensive and defensive line, had 61 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. He was second on the team in tackles too, so that's going to be a tough one as well. They also lose Jordan Davis Voss. He was an addition to this team as he only played his senior year of high school football here, but he had 59 tackles, 21 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks, leading the team in sacks and tackles for loss. He was a 6'4", 190-pound defensive end that brought some length there, so he'll definitely be missed. They're also graduating corner Colton Clark. He had 50 tackles along with a team-high 4 interceptions. And then these are 2 guys that I definitely want to talk about in Elijah Jenks and Mikey Norris. Both played on both lines, offensive and defensive line, for this squad, and were big contributors for multiple years now. It feels like at least 3 years. Jenks, he had 38 tackles, 5 tackles for loss there. Mikey Norris only played 3 games, it looks like here, but he had 7 tackles. Regardless, that's depth that you are losing. And, you know, size up front. Jenks, I think, was their defensive tackle, too. So, there you go there. And then last but not least, they will also be losing TJ Washington, who has transferred to Widefield, where he probably will be the guy over there. This season, we kind of saw him lose some snaps here for sure. Only had 51 carries in 10 games, where he rushed for 249 yards and 4 touchdowns. He was the 4th leading rusher on the squad, and everyone else, you know, who got snaps ahead of him are all coming back. So that kind of made him the odd man out. What makes this really difficult too, though, is that he was their starting linebacker and their lead tackler with 74 tackles and 6 tackles for loss here. So, you know, that's tough. That's definitely tough, losing a player like him. He's been playing for a really long time. I feel like he might have started as a freshman or a sophomore. So that's definitely a tough loss to have there, but they do bring back a number of guys, though. Before we do that, though, I do want to say Harrison is losing now 11 of their top 13 tacklers. That's a lot of front seven guys, plus the majority of their offensive line, it looks like, will be leaving as well. So this is a tough go for Harrison. They're losing their defense basically, and then a lot of guys up front on the offensive line. So we'll just have to see how they navigate that, but it's not like they'll be without talent. Let's talk about these three guys here that I think will be really big time for them, starting with Carlos Preciado. He'll be going into his senior year here, and he was the lead rusher with 1,242 rushing yards and 13 rushing touchdowns there on offense. And then on defense, he tagged on 46 tackles, 7 tackles for loss. He also had a sack as well. So he's one of the best athletes to be coming back for Harrison. The offense should probably start around him, with him being the workhorse as well. So we'll just have to see what happens there. They also bring back another incoming senior in Jazari Spencer. As a junior, had 72 carries and ran for 465 yards here. No touchdowns, but he did outpace, it looked like, TJ Washington here. And Jazari Spencer, he's a big time speedster, has a lot of speed, real agile, so he adds that component to this Harrison squad here, as Carlos is a little bit more of a balanced / power back type. So there's that, but I think these two will get the majority of the carries here and really help this team out. But in addition, they also returned Maurice Martin as a sophomore. He actually ended up being the second leading rusher with 491 yards on only 53 carries here. But he had 8 touchdowns though, so that's definitely big time. He had 9 yards a carry too, by the way. And so look for him to potentially turn up as well. Also my bad, on offense here at receiver, he caught for 111 yards and a touchdown and was a DB on defense. Look for him to probably take a bigger role on defense. Really, all these guys, I could see Jazari Spencer taking on a much bigger role on defense as well, since they are losing so many players. Spencer had 21 tackles, by the way, so there you go there. Really expect these guys to play both ways and be big-time contributors going both ways, so that'll be huge for them. But I think this Harrison squad will revolve around these 3 players here on both sides of the football as they look to potentially make it back to the playoffs, which won't be easy. They're still losing a lot here. The defense is definitely a bit concerning to be losing, as they did hold it down at times throughout the season. And then offensively, you kind of got to hope that they're able to scheme around losing so many linemen. So with that being said, they play wide field, so they face TJ Washington right away here. I think that's a loss. They got Paul Mitchell and now TJ over there. I think that's a tough one to win. Just straight up, I think that's a tough one to win there, as they do have a quarterback who could throw and, put this defense in a really difficult spot if they're not ready. Following that, though, they play TCA. They haven't beat this team in a while, but I think this year is as good as ever to beat them. They're really small up front here, so that might, cancel out the difference between size and all that great stuff. Plus, for the first time in a while, it just feels like they're rebuilding, as they are losing a ton of players and they don't have that many established players. So I really feel like Harrison could go ahead and take this one against TCA for the first time in a minute. But then they play Pueblo County. That's Naga and company over there. Plus Jonathan Gonzalez as well. I think this is definitely winnable, but County just returns a lot more on offense than they do. And so I think that's going to be a tough one to beat. I think that's a loss. But then they play Mitchell, Canyon City, Pueblo Centennial. I think those are all wins there that should definitely go their way. Following that, they play Pueblo South. I think that's a win as well. They should be able to overcome them with much more established skill players here. Pueblo South, they have some big bodies, but they don't really have anybody established here. Plus, by this point, hopefully the defense is a little bit more put together, so that would definitely go a long way there. But then they play Pueblo Central. Last year was a very close game, but I think Central has a couple more weapons, plus they return most of their linemen as well. Could be a close one, but I'm going to mark this one up as a loss. Then they play Sierra. I think that's a win right there. They should just grind it out on the ground. And so there you go there. Altogether, I have Harrison going 6-3 with the window of wins between 5 and 8. This Harrison team, they're losing some significant size up front, and that has really powered this team throughout the years. And so they're going to be very skill player heavy, which I think is enough for them to get over 500 or at least get to 500. But the playoff race will be close, as teams like Pueblo County and Central will be vying for a playoff spot as they both take steps forward, or at least they should. And so most likely, I think for their best chance to make the playoffs, they need to beat one or the other, if not both, right? Well, if they beat both, then I think they for sure make the playoffs. But if they beat one, I think that really helps their chances here, as that definitely should put them over 500. Another, I guess, area of concern is also the quarterback spot. It might make sense to move one of these running backs to quarterback and, just really commit to running the football there. So we'll just have to see what happened. Like I said, really concerned about the losses up front, but they have really good skill players. Hopefully that can make up the difference moving forward. We'll just have to see. Okay, now real quick, we're going to talk about Mitchell. This will be pretty short here. I'm not even going to lie. Last year predicted them to not win any games, and that's what they did. I did ask, can this coaching staff turn this program around? Mitchell hasn't really won a game here since 2019, so going on 4 years. This is their 5th new head coach now they have a new head coach, so yeah, it is their 5th new head coach in 5 years. And the coach last year, I'm not even gonna lie, he thought I forgot this. He definitely got on me for not having more faith in them. Well, coach, not only did you quit, but you also went 0-10. So that's not good either. So there you go there. I mean, none of their games are really close except for Lincoln, where they only lost 22-8. But other than that, they were outscored on the season, by the way, 526-26, allowing 52.6 points a game and only scoring in 3 of their 10 games. And, the last coach really didn't do much to help out this program, honestly. No rosters, no stats, so can't really predict anybody. Don't really know any key players. I don't know how many players are even going to come back here. And so, honestly, my predicted record for the squad is 0-10 here. It sucks, 0-10. We'll see if this new head coach could kind of turn things around. At this point, we'll just have to see what happens. I don't know what to expect, really. I mean, they don't have too many proven players, which really kind of just puts them in a tough spot here. But hopefully someone could emerge here and they could work off of that. So we'll just have to see what happens, I guess. And, we'll go from there. But at this point, they're just at a proven point. I mean, they need to prove that they're not the worst team in Colorado, and they got to show me something here. And, that would help by, listing stats, even if you are getting blown out, So we'll just have to see what happens moving forward here for Mitchell, but it should be another winless campaign for them. Okay, moving on, though, we got Sand Creek here. Last year, I actually was a little bit more positive about them. I had them with a window of wins anywhere between 4 and 6. They won 2-8, so I was just dead wrong about this squad here. I guess let's just go down the schedule. They beat Palmer 28-12. I expected them to do that. I thought I had them beating Air Academy here. Instead, they got blown out 40-12. I also had them beating Wheat Ridge. And they lost that one. It was a close one, 27-22. But even then, I didn't think it would be that close. So there you go there. Did predict them losing to TCA, though, 43-0. They didn't have Rez Christian scheduled yet, but I would have predicted that one as a loss. Rez beat them 56-0, by the way. Then they played Pueblo East here. I think this was another team that wasn't scheduled yet. But they beat them 58-14, which I could have predicted as well. Then they played Mitchell, who they beat 59-12. I predicted that one correctly. Would go on, play Pueblo County, lose to them 41-15. Would lose to Canyon City in a kind of a weird score here, 15-2. So that happened. I definitely, predicted that one correctly, though. Then they would play Discovery Canyon here, and they lost to them 20-6. This was a game that was not scheduled yet when I did their predictions. So there you go. So you have a couple close losses here, I guess. Canyon City, Discovery Canyon, Wheat Ridge were all losses that were within 2 or so scores, which would have put them, inside my window of wins here. But hey, it is what it is. These things happen. Sometimes it's just not your year. But, let's talk about some graduating seniors here. It looked like they stopped taking stats like halfway through the season for a lot of these players. So I'm going with what I have here, starting with Brian Oberrosler, I want to say. He was their starting quarterback, at least for the majority of the time here. He threw for 737 yards, accounted for 8 touchdowns. The other quarterback was also a senior, though, in Burnell. He threw for 354 yards, and 5 touchdowns, as it kind of looked like they wanted to pass the ball a little bit more here, and that probably picked up going into the end of the season. So there you go. There, regardless, they're losing their quarterback, so they don't have one returning out of the 2 they played last year. They also lose Keith Reddix as well. And by the way, Oberrosler Jr. was their leading rusher with 150 rushing yards, at least according to this. So there you go. But anyways, they lose Keith Reddix. He switched over to receiver, had some solid games for them. Only caught for 177 yards and 3 touchdowns, though. He's kind of been a guy that's been on this team for a minute, though, and has been big time, so there you go. They also lose Omeo Alexander. He was the lead tackler, at least in the first half of the season he was, where he had 32 tackles, and he also played tight end for the squad. He had 117 receiving yards and a touchdown in the half season that they recorded, so he'll be missed. They also lose Chris Hodge. He had 104 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. He also played safety as well, where he had 28 tackles and 2 tackles for loss, along with a sack and 4 interceptions. So he was their lead interception guy. So they lose all of those guys. And then I guess according to their half-season stats, which please, just fill out the whole thing. I don't know why you do that halfway through the season. They're losing 6 of their top 13 tacklers, so that's tough, but they're definitely losing a lot of skill players on offense, both their quarterbacks here, and I guess their leading rusher as well. And then they're losing their 2nd, 3rd, and 4th leading receiver here, so they're not returning too many receivers that caught over 100 yards, at least in that first half of the season. So definitely tough here, kind of hard to put a finger on where they're at and whatnot, but there are 2 players that I think are really going to be the main focal points for this team. The first one is Elijah Brothers as the lead receiver, and mind you, stats only recorded for half the season. He caught 33 receptions for 533 yards and 4 touchdowns there as a sophomore. So going into his junior year, should definitely look to make a bigger impact as a leader on the offense. We'll see what they do there, if they have another quarterback waiting or if they move him to quarterback and just, revolve the offense around him. We'll just have to see what happens. But regardless, I think he's a watch list guy. I looked at his film, really liked what I saw there. He's a good athlete, so he should definitely be, one of the bright spots for this team moving forward. They also bring back Haziah Rapp. Rapp has been an absolute force for this team for years now. I believe he will be going into his senior year, but last year, he got 10 sacks in the first half season stats that were recorded 4.5 of those were against Mitchell, I would say, and 3 were against Palmer, but even then, he got going here, and so going into his senior year, things will get interesting as he will be the main star for this defense. So there you go. Those are the 2 guys they should be building around here. Hopefully they continue to keep stats here as they really started out strong, but it looks like they might throw the ball a little bit more here, have a change of philosophy. We'll just have to see. But to start off, they play Palmer. Palmer, this is the best team they've had in a really long time. I think that's a loss. If Sand Creek can find an established quarterback, though, they should win. Well, they don't have an established quarterback. If they could have a quarterback that's relatively solid or good, then they should win, I should say there. But for now, I'm going to give this one a loss. Palmer, they have a lot of pieces, especially on offense, which I think will make it tough for them to keep up with. Then they play Air Academy. I think this is another winnable game, just like Palmer, but it's a loss in my opinion. They won't have Sam Beers, right, who has terrorized Colorado Springs for a while here. But they do have a couple other players like King David Rogers, Caleb Kasayaka. You know, this will be a tough squad for sure still though, as they do have some pieces of their own. Then they play Wheat Ridge. They should beat Wheat Ridge. They should be a win here. I don't even know why they lost to them last year, but Wheat Ridge is losing their quarterback. So there you go. I think they should be able to beat them here. Then they play TCA. I'm going to call that one a dub. They don't bring back too many players, and I think it's still early enough in the season where Sand Creek could go ahead and sneak this one. Now, it will be away, you know, which, I mean, it's not that big a deal, but it will be at the end of the month, so maybe this is one TCA wins. For now, I'm going to go ahead and call this one a win for Sand Creek. I like Keziah Rapp against this offensive line. Then they play Resurrection Christian, Pueblo East. Both of those are losses. Mitchell should be a dub. Pueblo County will be a loss, I think. They then play Canyon City. I think that's a win. I think Canyon City is losing a lot. They will run the ball a lot with Jacob Damage there. I think by this point, hopefully, there's a couple more established players for Sand Creek. That should really help them out moving forward here. So there you go. And then last but not least, they play Discovery Canyon at the end. I think they beat them. Discovery Canyon doesn't have too many established players, so there you go there. Altogether, I actually have Sand Creek going 5-5 with a window of wins anywhere between 3 and 6. I think they're going in the right direction by throwing the ball a lot more, and they got, you know, at least some stats put down. But once more, they are without a quarterback for, like, an established quarterback, that is, for like the second straight year. They'll be close to 500, but I don't know if they're a playoff team. So we'll just have to see what happens with Sand Creek moving forward. Should definitely be a year where we see some guys emerge for them, and I think that'll be pretty big for this program. But until then, I got them going 5-5. Okay, let's talk about Sierra next here. Last year, predicted them to go 2-8 with a window of wins between 1 and 2 here. On the season, though, you know, I feel like it doesn't reflect how good of a season they had. They went 1-9, so still fell within, you know, my window of wins here, so was definitely in the ballpark here. Said they would beat Mitchell, and they did, 50-0. That was their big win there. I did say they would beat Liberty here, and that was a close loss, 26-20. I think that's definitely winnable moving forward. You know, did say that was a toss-up, though. You know, I will say that. Other than that, they lost a lot of games here. Let me go down the line. Littleton, 12-8. That's a winnable one. Skyview, 56-16. Like I said, Liberty. Air Academy, 48-7. They lost. Pueblo South, 44-0. Pueblo Central, 65-14. Centennial was a little bit closer here, 55-42, but still a loss, though. Lewis Palmer, 46-14 in a loss, and Harrison, 49-6 in a loss. So definitely a tough go, but, you know, they did take steps forward. First things first, they were a lot better when it came to recording stats, which we appreciate a ton. It does help out, you know, some players with the recruitment and whatnot, too, so I think that goes a really long way. But, speaking of stats, let's go ahead and talk about some players that are graduating here, starting with Tony Pickram here. At linebacker, he led the squad with 86 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and is one of the few seniors here that will be graduating. Other than that, there's not too many here. I mean, there's Aaron Wagner here. He had 25 tackles on defense. You also have Nigel Piper. He had a couple of tackles as well. He had 19 tackles on defense. Also, Wagner had a sack, So there you go. And Piper, he was second in interceptions with 2. So you are losing some guys, right? Just a couple. But other than that, just looking through the roster here, they're not losing too much here. Oh, but my bad. Piper, he also had 147 receiving yards and a touchdown. Marcus Mills here, who had a couple carries for 120 yards. Only played 3 games, though. So there you go there. Other than that, they're only losing 3 of their top 13 tacklers. So, not bad, not bad at all. They pretty much returned the same squad here. And so let's talk about this squad, starting with star wide receiver Micah Lumpkin, star athlete Micah Lumpkin. He played both ways. But at receiver, he was the majority of this offense, catching 52 receptions for 1,286 yards and 12 touchdowns, having a bit of a breakout season here, doing his thing, turning up, scored half of the team's touchdowns, which is huge, and I think he's going to be a force to be reckoned with. Also had 140 rushing yards and a touchdown there. On defense, he had 34 tackles and was the lead interception leader. He was the interception leader here with 3 interceptions, so definitely a great athlete. I think he's a next level player, probably D1 for sure. D1 for sure, actually. I would say he has really good speed, and so really like this athlete here in Micah. Also got to watch him work quite a bit during the off season, I feel, and I saw him compete and whatnot, and so I like where he's at. He's going to be probably one of the best players Sierra has had in a hot minute here. So there you go there. They also returned his quarterback here in Ryan, and excuse me if I just butcher this name. I'm sorry, but I'm going to try my best here. But Ryan Stankiewicz, I want to say here. He had a solid junior year, throwing for 1,964 yards, 17 touchdowns and 12 picks. Like I said, a lot of those did go to Micah here. But regardless, still bringing back him. You're also bringing back his second leading receiver in Malachi Brown here for his senior year. He caught 14 receptions for 291 yards and 2 touchdowns, which is pretty good, on only 14 receptions. You gotta absolutely love that. So you're obviously hoping that he could turn up as well, as a lot of attention will be on Micah, so he should definitely get the ball quite a bit here. And then before we go to the defensive side of things, they also returned Zaven Tolles here. The 6'2", 240-pound incoming senior tackle brings some size to the Sierra team that they haven't seen in a minute here. He's a tough lineman who showed a lot of upside at tackle. On the next level, I think he's probably a guard, though, as he is only 6'2" or so. But I still think he could play football on the next level. I think he's a little bit of a sleeper here. But listed at tackle, he will play tackle going into this next year. Then on defense, they also bring back Ruben Valenzuela, I want to say here. He was their lead tackler, or was their second leading tackler, I should say, on defense with 55 tackles, only as a sophomore, so he'll be going into his junior year here, which should be pretty big for Sierra. So they returned some guys, they returned their quarterback, they returned, their top 2 receivers, especially their star receiver, which I think will definitely be big time there, so that'll be huge. They return a good lineman in Tolles here, and then they return the majority of their defense. So going into this season, they should definitely improve just a little bit here, which is what you're going to take, right? And so in their first game, they play Littleton. That's at home. This is a very favorable game, especially early on in the season. This Littleton team is losing a ton, plus they're losing their coaching staff as well, so it's a new coaching staff, a lot of new faces on this team. This really should be a win, right? And it's at home too, so that should definitely be a win here. If they would have played them a little bit later on, I might have been a little bit more worried, but hey, they play them first game. I think that's definitely a win. Following that, they play Skyview, though. Skyview, they return Loza, who went off against this team for like 200 plus yards. The defense needs to pick up the pace here and play better, and they probably should. Now, is it enough to make this that much closer of a game? I honestly don't know. I don't know. So, we'll see there, but I think that's a loss. Then they play Liberty here. That's on a Thursday at home. That might be a game I might pop by or go to. Not pop by. I'll go to it, and watch the whole thing. Because I think that's going to be a close one. Liberty returns everyone. Sierra returns mostly everyone here. I am going to give this to Liberty, though. I think they are a little bit more well-rounded here. They do have a running back who's been turning up, and then their quarterback comes back, which should help out their passing game. But I wouldn't put it out the question for Sierra to definitely beat them here. Then, after that, they play Air Academy away here. No Sam Beers for Air Academy, but they still have some good weapons, and I kind of still worry about this defense struggling with that. But this is definitely a winnable game, though. For now, I will call it a loss as it is on the road, and they are returning guys like David Rogers, or like King David Rogers over there, and Caleb Kasayaka as well, who I think should be able to turn up against this defense. If it turns into a shootout, I'm probably going to go Air Academy's way, but like I said, like the Liberty game, this is definitely a winnable one. Then they play Mitchell. That should definitely be a dub. Pueblo South, they're pretty big up front. I think that's where Sierra might struggle, so that's a loss. Central, this is another tough game for the defense. They have a lot of weapons. That's a loss. Then they play Pueblo Centennial. I think that's definitely a win there. Michael Lumpkin will be a handful for them. He'll be going up against their best corner. They have a good one over there in Honoran there. So there's that. You're probably going to need other guys to step up. But even then, I don't know if Pueblo Centennial could keep up offensively. So that's a dub. And then they play Lewis Palmer. That's a loss. They have a tough running game. Same with Harrison. That's a loss. They also have a tough running game. So altogether, I have them improving here at 3-7 with a window of wins, though, between 1 and 5. So I'm going with the safe bet here. But I think this is a team, at best, that can be at 500. I have them going 3-7, like I said. But I think at best, I could definitely see them at 500. They would definitely need to beat Liberty and probably Air Academy or Pueblo South to get there. And those are games where, Michael Lumpkin, he has to have at least 100 plus receiving yards and at least 1+ touchdowns to probably win those games. That is unless, Malachi Brown turns up as well, and that would really help them out there too. So we'll just have to see about that. But honestly, for the first time in a while, this Sierra team has some really good pieces around them. They also consistently posted stats, which is a positive. Like I said, it's not always going to look pretty, but at least you did it. And that goes a long way, with recruitment and covering this squad as well. So there you go there. I think another bright spot about this team is that they also bring back an experienced defense. So, you kind of just got to hope that they take the experiences from last season and they take a step forward here. So they do have the opportunity to win multiple games and get close to 500. We'll just have to see if, they could do that. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about TCA, the Classical Academy, my alma mater here, graduated from here. Go Titans, and obviously still friends with a lot of people who, had siblings that still go to the school and whatnot. So I'm still very in tune with TCA right here. At least I like to think so. But last season, or I guess last year, I predicted TCA going 8-1 here with the window of wins between 8 and 9. I knew they were returning a lot of size up front here, some good size here, and they were returning a stud in Ethan Aragundi, plus a pretty good defense led by that front seven. And so while there were some rumors, I guess, around, the 2A community about TCA falling off, I definitely disputed that, as I felt like they should still be pretty good. And they were. They went 8-1 here. I'm pretty sure I predicted almost every game right, except for the first game and the last game. Because in the first game, they played Eden, beat them 19-16 at home. I will say that was an Eden team that wasn't in school yet, and they wouldn't be in school for at least another week or two. So they were in a kind of a tough situation, but regardless, hey, they can't control that. They beat him, and that's what mattered, and I think that was really important in seeding moving forward. So there you go, 19-16 over Eden. The rest of the games pretty much went as planned. Beat Harrison 44-0, Alamosa 42-14, Sand Creek 43-0, Alameda 56-0, Denver West 51-0. Englewood in league play here, 48-12 in a dub, and then beat Ken Denver 49-7. Then in the last game of the season, they played Elizabeth. I originally thought this was going to be a win, but instead they dropped a close one, 15-14. Which, I don't know if that mattered too much, to be completely honest with you. It was at the end of the season. Their position wasn't going to change all that much there. So there you go there. So just switch the Eden and Elizabeth games, which, by the way, were both still really close games, and there you go there. But still finished 8-1. That was exactly on the money. Now in the playoffs, went ahead, beat Moffat County 38-21. That was a little bit closer, but, they were definitely in control of most of that game. They would go away up to Greeley, play University, and humbled them pretty much there, 44-12. So there you go. That was a big defensive performance, I want to say, and a great job by the line, just clearing the way and just kind of bullying that defense up there. That's how dominant this line was. Then they played away once more over at Delta, and this one was a loss. They were trailing here. They really tried to close that gap in the fourth quarter. They just couldn't quite get there. Because, they couldn't pass the ball super well, which I have been critical of them before, so just throwing that out there. But they lost to them 24-17, just a touchdown short of going back to state here. So definitely a positive season for TCA here. I mean, they got all the way to semis, was a touchdown away from state. They just couldn't get there. So that's definitely tough here. And I think if they played Eden, that would have been a pretty good matchup as well, size on size wise. I would say they might even have the edge too. I mean, they already beat them at one point, so that would have been interesting. But, it is what it is. So there you go there. Now, I did make a prediction about their defensive linemen. I did say there's a universe where each of their defensive linemen got 5+ sacks each. That didn't happen, but Caden Rusin, he had 7 sacks. Tanner Ide had 4.5 sacks, and they're still really dominant. Ethan Aragundi met expectations as well, so there you go. But let's go ahead and talk about graduating seniors before we talk about any more of these guys here. Let's start with Ethan Aragundi. As expected, rushed for 1,374 yards, 16 touchdowns, also added on 35 tackles as a linebacker. Now he's gone. He was getting carries for a really long time through his 3 or 4 years here at TCA. He was the main guy last year. He made the most out of it, in my opinion. So there you go. But they also graduate a whole ton of offensive and defensive linemen. Levi Johnson, Dakota Montgomery, Tanner Ide. Those 3 guys are all playmaker guys, so they're losing all of them, as well as Reese Leonard, Blake Van Tongren as well. This was an elite group of 2A linemen with multiple all-playmaker guys. Levi Johnson even going D1 here to Northern Colorado, Skull Bears, so that's definitely big time. And, Johnson, Van Tongren, and Ide were top 13 in tackles, combining for 133 tackles and 9.5 sacks. And obviously, I mean, there's a lot of plays that aren't going to be, recordable stat-wise, so you got to keep that in mind. When you're just a big dude and you're dominating guys, you're going to affect the game regardless, right? So there you go. That's a really difficult group to replace, because that's basically their entire offensive line and defensive line, if not the majority there. So there you go. They also lose Caden Rusin, the 6'3", 205-pound defensive end and tight end. He was also, I think, their second leading rusher. He had 553 rushing yards and 11 rushing touchdowns, kind of more as their, power back there. So he will be gone. And on defense, he had 51 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, and then led the team with 7 sacks. So there you go. that's the entire defensive line basically at that point. They also lose Aaron Johnson here. He was their lead receiver, as I expected him to be. He caught 35 receptions for 471 yards and 6 touchdowns. Also had 226 rushing yards and 6 touchdowns as the fourth leading rusher on this team. That's definitely tough to be losing. He was an all Playmaker corner too, I believe. So that's another guy in your defense that you are losing. So there you go there. Altogether, they are losing 10 of their top 13 tackles. That's about 75% of all the total tackles made on this team last year. So they're losing a lot. They're losing their top 5 leading tacklers, which is not good. And then I think they're also losing their kicker as well. And, you know, TCA has historically also had very good kickers. So, yeah, Evan Lepore, he's out of there, and he was an all-Playmaker guy as well. So, they're losing a lot here. Not really a ton to work with. But I guess let's talk about some key players, starting with their quarterback, Andrew Brown. Started as a sophomore, had a, solid year, throwing for 939 yards, 9 touchdowns to 3 picks, rushed for 380 yards. 360 yards and 5 touchdowns. He was actually, I want to say, the 3rd leading rusher. So there you go there. The amount of offense TCA is losing is definitely going to be tough, but at least they bring back their quarterback here. But he is facing an uphill battle, losing a very dominant offensive line, losing all the running backs, or most of the running backs he used to hand off to, as well as his top 5 wide receivers, which is tough. Actually, now that I'm looking at this, they're only returning 1 receiver who caught more than 1 reception. So, Jesus, that's going to be tough to replace as well. So he's looking at an uphill battle. If it looks like the numbers are taking a step back, it's not because of him. It's because, he's working with an entirely new group this season, going into his junior year. You hope he could figure it out, as last year, he threw for that much and whatnot, but the way TCA operates, he's definitely more of a secondary or even 3rd or 4th option, as they're going to run the ball, especially with the line they have. So that's tough. But hopefully he could take a step forward and could be maybe a lone bright spot for this team. They also returned Campbell Guy here. He's one of the few returning defensive players. He had 45 tackles. So there you go. There he will be returning for his senior year. And so at least that's somebody that you could kind of work around here as one of your leaders. So there you go. Speaking of leaders, they also returned Jaron Texer, one of the few returning members of the defense. He had 32 tackles and 2 interceptions, both of those interceptions coming in the playoffs, by the way. He will have to hold it down at DB while adding some, production at receiver, as he should get a lot more snaps there, and I think that will be good for TCA. I think he is a really good corner as well. He's also been rocking with us for a minute, by the way. But anyways, really good corner, good cover guy to kind of add there with the Goss. So there you go. And then I did not initially write him down, but I want to talk about him still, though. You have Michael Wu. He added on 35 tackles on defense, and he is, I guess, their best leading rusher coming back outside of Andrew Brown. He had 161 rushing yards and a touchdown on 30 carries. So, maybe he'll get in the mix as he also enters his senior year. Altogether, though, they're looking at a pretty new page here, as they are turning it. Finally, I would say at this point, looking at some of the linemen, they're definitely not as big as the linemen that they returned from last year. So it's going to be some growing here that TCA will have to do. It might be a tough season. I think this is definitely maybe a growing and rebuilding year for them as they enter this 23 campaign. But let's talk about their schedule. They play Eden. This one will be on Saturday, the 26th, at Eden. I may look into sending someone there if I'm not going there personally. We'll just have to see about that. That should be a good one. Eden will be losing a lot as well, so both these teams will be looking very differently. They are losing Gunnar Clary. That is something we just found out just a bit ago, as of July 19th when I'm recording this. And I think that'll matter because it's been a really long time since Eden has not had a power back and a good defensive player like him to rely on. And so I think there is a world where TCA beats them. But, I think Eden returns some significant size up front and continuity up front as well, which will be tough for TCA to handle. And they still got a running back in D'Angelo Rosas, who I think is very good. And they used a lot last season, whereas Andrew Brown was kind of somebody they didn't, make a focal point around. TCA did it last season. So with all that being said, I think that's a loss. Plus, it's away at Eden, so that's never an easy thing. Eden has one of the best home field advantages in the state, so there you go there. Then they play Harrison. I think they lose this one as well as they do bring back, a nice collection, array of offensive weapons there. Just talked about them earlier on in this episode, so you could hear more about that. Then they play Alamosa. That will be at home here. Alamosa does lose their quarterback, but they bring back RJ Mice and Brant Jackson here. Both of those guys are pretty tough. Brant Jackson at 6'4", 200 plus pounds, by the way. He's going to be tough to stop off the edge, plus at wide receiver. That's going to be a tough matchup for Jaren Texer there. We'll just have to see what happens. That might be closer, but I kind of trust Alamosa here as they do bring back a lot more all around, not just losing their quarterback and wide receiver. Or only really losing their quarterback and wide receiver is what I should say. So there you go. Then they play Sand Creek. Isaiah Rapp and Elijah Brothers will be difficult to stop, but Brothers, he can't really do anything if he doesn't have a competent quarterback throwing to him. So there is that. Isaiah Rapp, though, that could be some trouble for this line. Could go either way. I think this is a winnable game, really, if TCA has a couple, multiple players emerge for them. So I'm going to make that a toss-up game here, but I'm going to say for now that's a loss. Should beat Alameda, though, that's a dub. Should beat Denver West, I think that's a dub. I think they just have to scheme to stop Ahmad Hussein over there, though. If they can, that's a win. Englewood, though, that's a way. That's a loss. They bring back their quarterback, who I think is going to be very good, along with multiple other players, including their starting defensive tackle, Jace Pronte, who could be some issues for this offensive line. Then they play Kent Denver. I think this will be a closer game. This one will be away. It's on a Saturday as of right now. We'll look to potentially go to this one here. But Kent Denver has a tough offense. I like their quarterback, Yanni Balafis. They also bring back Nicholas Beaucheneau, I want to say. And that's tough. Or I want to say. I could be wrong about that. Either way, he's a big 6'4", 6'5" tight end / receiver. Ooh, I don't know. That makes me a little bit nervous. I think that's definitely probably a loss for for TCA there. A win for Kent Denver. Could maybe go the other way if this defense really comes along for TCA, but we'll just have to see. Then they play Elizabeth. I think that's a loss. Elizabeth should be one of the top tier playoff teams here in 2A. So there you go. Altogether, this might be inaccurate. I have them going 2-7 though, with the window of wins anywhere between 2 and 4. This TCA team is super green. As much I'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt, I think at this point, there's a lot of inexperience to overcome. And so it's a rebuilding / learning year. We'll just have to see what happens here. I mean, they're losing the majority of their team altogether, not just the offense or defense, their team, period. They have no skill, or they're losing a lot of skill players. They are losing basically, I think, their entire offensive line and defensive line. So that's tough. A lot of linebackers and corners and safeties going as well. There's going to be some players that need to step up for this team to finish above that, which I think is possible. Just right now, I just don't know who they are. So that's kind of where I'm at. So there you go. TCA, I have them going 2-7 with a window of wins between 2 and 4. Should probably be a learning year here. So there you go. All right, now for our last team. We got Palmer Ridge here last season. Predicted them going 9-1 with a window of wins between 8 and 10. They would actually go a perfect 10-0 in the regular season. So still falling within the window of wins, which I will definitely take there. Let's go ahead and go down the line, just talking about each game. Would beat Montrose 35-28. That was a huge one. That was, I think, the only game I had them potentially losing here. I'm pretty sure here. That Montrose game was going to be a tough one. Or actually, no, sorry. I did have them beating them. Sorry, I did have them beating them. It was a different game, which we'll talk about later. But then they beat Mesa Ridge 28-7, Lewis Palmer 58-17, Smoky Hill 44-16, Ponderosa 48-34. Relatively close one, but not really. Rampart 49-0, beat Pueblo West 21-0, Air Academy 56-0. Cheyenne Mountain 56-26. And then the Vista Ridge game was the game that I thought maybe, could maybe go the other way here. That was the one that I thought would be a loss, but they would actually win this one. Me and Cody, we were there. We witnessed the comeback as they beat them 24-17. That was a game where Vista Ridge led in the third quarter by 2 scores, and then they basically just gave it up. So there you go there. And that would put them as one of the top seeds in the playoffs here, where they would go ahead, play Skyline, blew them out 44-7. They would play Vista Ridge following that, beat them 35-21. The score was not as close as it looked, I feel, there, as they really pulled away in the fourth quarter, once more handling them. Then they would play Loveland in the playoffs. This was a close loss here. Lost to them 10-7 in the playoffs, just short of state. I did say this was a team that could contend. They came up just 3 points short, which is really tough for, honestly, such a great squad here. So there you go there. That was Palmer Ridge's season. Still, I would say a successful one, going undefeated and then being so close to state, going back to state like that. I mean, that's obviously tough, though. Now, they are losing a lot of players to graduation, starting with Jackson St. Aubin. Played a lot of left tackle last year and was a member of a truly dominant offensive line. Was an all-PMC guy. Probably would have been a top 5 senior guy if we had him at tackle instead of guard. So there you go there. But he has been a mainstay, and so that's a really tough player to be losing at tackle there. They're also losing both the running backs. First and Gator Robinson. He was a top-tier running back, running for 1,132 yards and 12 touchdowns. They also lose his backup, who was a senior as well, in Orlando Aranda here. He ran for a pretty solid 676 yards and 11 touchdowns, so you're losing both of those guys. They are also losing their lead receiver here in Casey Fackrell here. He had 41 receptions, 617 yards, 5 receiving touchdowns. He was also a leader on the defense with 34 tackles and 2 picks. He was a longtime member of this squad, so he will be graduating, and was also the top 5 senior corner in our series last season in that class of 2023. He'll be playing football on the next level. I want to say he was also an all-PMC guy. So there you go. The losses in their secondary continue here. They also lose KJ Smedley at safety. He had 3 interceptions, 90 tackles. Talked with him just a couple months ago. He is at UNC right now, so really looking forward to having him be part of the Bear family and turn up for the Bears there. But he will be gone. He's been playing safety for Palmer Ridge for 4 years, it felt like, or some sort of DB for 4 years, it felt like. So that's a tough one to be losing. They also lose their other safety in Josh Gerlach here. He made our top 5 senior list, and I believe was an all Playmaker guy as well. He had 65 tackles and led the team in interceptions with 4. So he's gone. They also lose Chris Rice, another corner who made our top 5 senior list as well. He contributed a lot to them down the line, I would say, especially, and so they're losing him. They also lose Dylan Coyle at linebacker. He had 77 tackles, was extremely productive. Altogether, on paper, it doesn't look that bad. They're only losing, 6 of their top 13 tacklers, but they're basically losing their entire secondary, who was elite and has really made Palmer Ridge relevant in these last couple years. So definitely a tough go. Also, Jackson St. Aubin was on defense too, by the way, with 41 tackles there. So this is definitely a really tough go for Palmer Ridge, losing such a core part of their defense, as well as a lineman, their 2 running backs, their lead receiver, and also their third receiver here. KJ Smedley had 199 yards and a touchdown there. So there's that. And then on top of that, they're losing their head coach, Mike Armentrout. He will be moving on here. And so the next head coach of Palmer Ridge is Zach Carlton, who I believe is their, or was their, defensive coordinator. So, you know, the defense should be relatively fine here. Offensively, I think there might still be some questions, though, as they are going to look to replace that. So we'll just have to see what happens moving forward. But let's talk about some key players, starting with their quarterback, Derek Hester, entering his 3rd year. Last year, though, he took a step forward, throwing for 1,777 yards, 14 touchdowns to 4 picks to, you know, a 55% completion percentage here, which wasn't great. They kind of moved away from that, and they ran him a lot more here, where he would run for 871 yards and 13 rushing touchdowns. Still a dual threat. I mean, he could make some good passes here, but definitely more known for his running ability. Going into his senior year, though, he's going to have to throw it a lot more to help out the squad that is losing a key offensive lineman, plus, you know, all the running backs. So currently they only have 1 running back returning who ran for more than 100 yards here and got significant carries, and that is an incoming senior here in Gabe Klein. He ran for 247 yards and 4 touchdowns on 25 carries, which is definitely promising, but also behind a really good line led by Jackson St. Aubin as well. So that's kind of tough. So we'll just have to see what happens there. They also bring back James Jimmer Weir. He was, I want to say, their 2nd leading receiver here on 19 receptions, caught for 314 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's a good one to be bringing back, obviously. That'll be good for Palmer Ridge to bring back that receiving threat there. And then on the offensive line, they bring back Court Towns. The 6'4", 295-pound lineman will be a huge return for Palmer Ridge, especially on the offensive line here. So there you go there. And actually, he'll be a junior here, so he has 2 more years left, which will be big. Also plays defensive line as well, so that's some good size that they're bringing back to help anchor this squad here. But then on defense, I mean, you have a good amount of players to look out for. I would start with probably Holden Wright here, listed at a safety. He plays that safety linebacker hybrid here, but he's one of the best players on the squad. He had 91 tackles here, which is absolutely big time for them. So there you go there. 91 tackles and a sack and an interception. Should be a big returner for them. They also bring back Cooper Havener here. He had 93 tackles as well as 2 sacks, and I don't think he had any picks. So there you go there. So they're going to bring him back as well. They're also bringing back Owen Miranowski, TJ Mabe, Gabe Klein made some plays here on defense as well, and a whole bunch of other guys. Honestly, I mean, they have a pretty good linebacking core looking at them right here. A lot of talent there. A lot of guys who should hopefully take a step forward for this team. So, you know, like I said, they're not losing, I guess, the majority of their defense, but they are losing the majority of, of their secondary, which is definitely concerning. So still a good amount of pieces here. A lot of great linebackers to work around. You also have Court Towns at defensive line, which should help you out there as well. And then, you are returning your quarterback and some other players there too. I think Holden Wright might actually get more snaps at receiver too, so look out for that. So they got some good players, definitely something to work with, some continuity here. Plus, you have a coach in Carlton who has been with this team for a minute now, so that'll definitely help them out here. But let's go ahead and predict this record, as it'll be interesting. But they do play Montrose here. This one's at home. I'm potentially looking to go to this game here, and I think this one's going to be a loss. I mean, Montrose, they return just a lot more than them. I have questions about, some of the players to bring back on defense because they still got to replace half their guys. And then offensively, I am hoping they could figure it out here. And, Derek Hester and company could really turn up. But I honestly think that they're going to have to throw it against a team that is going to dare them to run the ball, as they will look to just, ice away that game right from the start there. So there you go. That's going to be a tough game to win. If they do, that'll be huge at home, but I just don't think they are quite there yet with this new new head coach and a couple of new players that plug in here as well. Then they play Mesa Ridge. This is definitely winnable, and this is a game that I think I'll be at here, but I think I'm going to call it a loss. Could go either way, but Mesa, they just have a lot of firepower over there. Palmer Ridge, they're also losing their secondary, so I think they are definitely a little bit more susceptible to the pass, which makes me really nervous for Palmer Ridge and whatnot. It could be a shootout, and if that does happen, I kind of trust Mesa Ridge to win that one, as they just have a lot more going on there on offense. So there you go there. Two tough teams against two playoff teams, but no worries. They should bounce back here with wins over Lewis Palmer and Smoky Hill here. That's when they play Ponderosa. They have a tough team that will stop them from running the ball here. And so if they're run-based, it's not a great recipe for winning here, as they will dare them to do that. Plus, they have some good offensive weapons here in Max Mervin and Carson Keach, who, I think this secondary might honestly struggle with. Carson Keach is a D1 guy. I also think Max Mervin will be one too here. So we'll just have to see, but I think that's a loss there. Then they play Rampart. I think that's a dub. Pueblo West, I think, should still be a dub there. They like to run the ball. And Palmer Ridge luckily has some really good linebackers. Now, if they throw it, they could be in a little bit more trouble, but I don't know if they will. So I think that's a dub there. Air Academy should be a win. Cheyenne Mountain should be a win. Then they play Vista Ridge at the end here. This could be a trap game, but honestly, I think they really need to win this game to solidify themselves in the playoffs. Just in case there's any doubt about them making it. And so I think that's definitely a dub there as well. So right now, I have Palmer Ridge going 7-3, so still not bad, with the window of wins between 5 and 8. I would be surprised if this team doesn't meet 500. I think that is the bare minimum there. Now, how many games to get over 500 will really depend on the core here. I mean, it's not an easy thing to lose the secondary, who is really good, the best in Colorado, in my opinion. Plus, you lose a really good lineman. You lose two backs who were mainstays of this team for a while. So you're losing quite a bit here if you are Palmer Ridge. Like they do, though, they always replenish and move forward. So you kind of just got to hope that Derek Hester could really carry here and do their thing. But honestly, for them to take a next step forward and truly be a contender, Derek Hester has to also pass it. So hopefully, he continues to develop as a passer, and they give him opportunities to pass the ball and really put games away. But we'll just have to see what happens here for Palmer Ridge. Regardless, I mean, they're still going to make the playoffs. It's really not that big of a deal. But like I said, we'll just have to see what happens. But that'll wrap up this episode of the Playmakers Corner. Thank you so much for rocking with us. If you want to get more updates about when episodes or watch lists or whatever is dropping, go ahead and, follow us on our social media at Playmakers Corner on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube as well, posting content there, just like, anywhere else like Spotify and whatnot there. And then it's Playmaker Corner on Twitter, so go ahead and follow us there, as we will continue to post more between watch lists, season previews. I do have a couple interviews to wind up here, so we'll release that closer to the start of the season as well. So a lot moving forward as we approach the 2023 football season. But until next time, I've been your host, Simon Villanoz, and I will see you next episode.